Now we can begin. For my project, I chose to look at the evolution of love stories in Disney princess movies, and I chose that because I grew up watching Disney princess movies, as a lot of little girls did, and I thought it would be interesting to look at those like romantic stories through the eyes of my adult experience, and also to be able to look at like the changes from like what was a love story for a Disney princess back in the 50s and versus today. Let's first start off with the methodology of this project. So basically I chose 4 Disney princess movies throughout the ages to watch. So I started with some older classic ones. Obviously I started with Snow White. That was the first Disney princess movie made. Then I went to Sleeping Beauty, and then I jumped to Mulan and then Frozen to get a perspective of like 90s and like the 2000s. Let me show you this beautiful chart. Give me a second while I research how to screen record. Here are the things I ended up coding for. So here are my coding prompts off to the side. I've got how did they meet, instant infatuation, friends or enemies to lovers, their drive for romance, reaction to conversations about love or marriage, any courting that they do, and does she get married to the guy. Here I have where I can select the movie, what thing I was coding for, and then I put the timestamp, and then like a description of what happened. So for example, Sleeping Beauty, how did they meet? It was at like 48-ish minutes. And they technically met when she was a baby, but Philip hears her singing in the woods and begins dancing and singing with her, which is really normal. And it's interesting that when I was taking notes, you can already kind of see there's like a pattern of like which movies have like more scenes with the guy. And I also did just like literally any description or conversation about love I coded for. I like found the amount of content that I was able to write about pretty significant. Okay, now let me show you what results I found. So here are my summarized thoughts from the coding chart that I made. I just wanted to walk you through some key patterns. I won't read like the whole chart because that would take a while, but some significant things to note are in like how did they meet section. Snow White and Sleeping Beauty of course have interesting stories. Like in Snow White and Sleeping Beauty, you see like Prince sings with Snow White at the well and she's like freaked out at first. Same with Sleeping Beauty, Prince Philip sings and dances with her in the forest. You see more like instant infatuation. Like yes, they're freaked out at first. And Sleeping Beauty even like almost has an awesome moment where she
Goodbye.
But when will I see you again?
Oh, never, never.
Never.
But instead, like, the prince starts singing to her and she is instantly infatuated with him.
Tomorrow?
Oh, no. This evening.
Where?
At the cottage.
Whereas in Mulan and Frozen, you see they kind of have, like, more natural ways of meeting.
I mean, sorry you had to see that, but you know how it is when you get those manly urges.
In Drive for Romance, for Snow White and Sleeping Beauty, it was like an intrinsic desire already. Same with Frozen. For Mulan, it was more of family pressure, bringing honor to her family. But also interesting to know with Snow White, she was like a scullery maid, so maybe for her it's like, oh, if I go be with a man, then like I can be free. Courting was really interesting. Just like the amount of like flirting or conversations between the prince and princess that actually happens is very different. So like for Snow White, they sing at the well together, but then you don't see the prince again until like the end of the movie. And Sleeping Beauty, there's actually quite a bit of flirting that goes on. They had like a couple fun conversations. Still, not enough to probably be like a proper relationship, but that's my modern thinking coming out. In Mulan, we get like some cute, like little awkward conversations. But then in Frozen, we get a lot more banter between Anna and Kristoff.
What if you hate the way he picks his nose?
Picks his nose?
And eats it.
Excuse me, sir, he is a prince.
Like with Hans, it was like instant infatuation and they still talked a lot and still had like some good courting. But I like that the relationship ended up working out with Kristoff where they actually like had built a quality relationship with trust. And you can definitely see a difference in culture through these movies, where in like Snow White and Sleeping Beauty, they didn't need that many interactions with the man before they were like, yes, I'm in love with him. Whereas in Mulan and Frozen, the men have to actually earn that position to be like a romantic interest. Like they don't just get to exist. and be a love interest. They have to actually like work for it. So here is a graph I also made. I wanted to show the percentage of time the love interest is on screen because I think that is very significant and shows a lot of change in culture. So in Snow White, Prince Charming is on screen for like literally 5.5 minutes. Like he's 6.6% of the movie. In Sleeping Beauty, we've got an increase. He's on screen for like 24% of the movie, which is a nice big jump. In Mulan, he's like a huge part of the plot, so he's like 34%. This is not like exact numbers, but I think they're pretty good estimates. Frozen, I think this is actually should be a little bit higher. I did this just for Kristoff. Kristoff is on screen for more like 23% of the movie. When I initially started this project, I was thinking back to watching these movies as a kid, and for some reason I just remember like the men being a lot more prominent than they really were. I definitely expected these movies to be more like, oh, it's all about like the man is the hero, but really Disney princess movies are first and foremost like women empowerment movies. They're about women who go through hard struggles, and the men are really just a subplot. And I thought this tied in really well to when we were talking about like gender stereotypes and also children's perceptions of media. So George Gerbner, we learned about him. His main idea was these sorts of systemic distortions communicate a strong message about who has power in culture. And I really did have like preconceived notions of like how I would view the plot and how the stereotypes of the women and the men would be. And I really honestly didn't find them to be like horrible. And I didn't find that like the women seemed oppressed. I really felt like even watching the older Disney princess movies that like the women were still like the heroes. I do appreciate that in the newer movies, especially in Frozen, we're exploring this idea of like what true love actually is. Like true love isn't just like finding a man in a forest. True love is truly being selfless. But I honestly felt like, at least for Snow White and Sleeping Beauty, I didn't feel like them as a female was like grossly portrayed. Like they're teenagers, so I honestly was not that disturbed by how instantly they fell for men. Like that's not teenagers falling instantly in love. It's like not that foreign of a concept. So as far as gender stereotypes, I really didn't feel like there was huge distortions in like a strong message about who has power in culture. There's definitely some cringy things in there for sure, don't get me wrong, but I really feel like they're just stories about women. So as far as construction of social reality goes, I felt like while watching these movies that they more reflect the culture of the time instead of the other way around. And I feel like, of course, like newer Disney princess movies, some of them like don't even have a love story. It's just about young girls like Moana just figuring out who they are. And I think that's incredible. And I think that is simply like a reflection of where we're headed as a society. I think before when they were making Disney princess movies, they were like entertainment with pretty music. And now we're trying to explore more like, okay, how do we be more intentional about telling women's stories? But this reminded me of when we were learning about how children viewed media. So when we were learning about how children view media, we talked about how like young children ages 2 to 7 years old, they view media very perceptually, just like there's not like some super complex ideas. It's very like this and this and this. And we talked about this regarding fear, but I found that I think a lot of like in my head going into this, I thought I would be more upset watching the older Disney princess movies because I haven't seen them since I was probably like 7 years old. And of course, when you're 7 years old, you only remember things as like, okay, pretty princess, evil stepmother, prince saves pretty princess from evil stepmother, and that's like all you can really comprehend. Whereas like as an adult, I found watching these movies that I liked them better because I was able to appreciate that like Snow White had a horrifying life and she overcame a lot by herself without the prince. But of course, like as a kid, you don't really like comprehend all of that. You're just kind of like, oh, pretty girl is in love with Prince and Prince saves her. And so I think that we should go back and watch the original Disney princess movies because there's a lot more like deep ideas than I think we realize. Like Sleeping Beauty, watching as an adult nearly made me cry. When I was a kid, I just liked watching Sleeping Beauty because she had really pretty hair and I liked her dress. So I think we should go back and watch these older Disney princess movies. I think we rag on like a lot of older media in our minds because I think we can only really remember it in little pieces. Okay, so in summary, I studied the evolution of love stories throughout Disney princess movies. And ultimately, I found that movies are a reflection of the times. Definitely the love story in the Disney princess movie is going to reflect what's socially okay for the time. And I do think that love stories will continue to evolve as society evolves, obviously. And I'm intrigued to see where Disney princesses are in 20 years. I'm sure there will be a lot more that don't have any love story at all, or some that have more complicated love stories. Also, men have more involvement, and I think that this is because it makes for a more believable love story. I also did not feel like men had more power, or that there was like a stereotype of men having more power in these movies. And so I think that we should all go back and watch Disney princess movies because there's probably a lot of important details and even possibly life lessons that you can learn from them with your adult experience that you didn't have as a child. Even though I was coding for specifically the love story of Disney princess movies, I found that there was a lot more depth to the plot and even the idea of what true love is that I didn't get as a child when all I was looking at was the pretty dresses. At the end of the day, I am actually probably more of a Disney princess fan now than I was as a child. And so go watch some Disney princess movies because you'll be pleasantly surprised. Thank you.